welcome back. We have another great reading today. Very excited to share this with you. This story is called The Lad Who Went to the North Wind. And the word lad is just another word for boy, so the boy who went to the north wind. Once upon a time, there was an old widow who had one son, and as she was poor and weak, her son had to go up into the cellar to fetch flour for cooking. But when he got outside the cellar and was just going up the steps, the north wind came and, puffing and blowing, blew the flour, and so it flew away into the air. Then the lad went back into the cellar for more. But when he came out again on the steps, the north wind came again and carried off the flour with a puff. And then again, it happened for a third time when he tried. Now this made the lad very angry, and he thought it was mean that the north wind would act that way. So he thought he would just go and find him and ask him to give back the flour. So off he went, but it was a very far journey, and he walked and walked and walked, but at last he came to the north wind's house. "Good day," said the lad, "and thank you for coming to see us yesterday."
"Good day," answered the north wind, for his voice was loud and gruff. "And thanks for coming to see me. What do you want?"
"Oh," answered the lad, "I only wish to ask you to please let me have back that flour you took away from me on the cellar steps, because we haven't much to live on. And if you keep taking all the food we have, there will be nothing left for us, and we will starve."
"I haven't got your flour," said the north wind. "But if you are in such need, I'll give you a magic cloth, which will give you everything you want. You only have to say, 'Cloth, spread yourself out and serve us all kinds of good food.'"
When he heard this, the boy was satisfied, and he left. But because the journey home was so long and he couldn't get there in one day, he had to stop at an inn on the way home to spend the night. And when he sat down to eat dinner, he laid the cloth on a table in the corner and said, "Cloth, spread yourself out and serve us all kinds of good food." Well, he had barely gotten the words out before the cloth did what it was supposed to, and everyone who saw it happen thought it was a very impressive thing, but especially the landlady who ran the inn. So when everyone was fast asleep, in the middle of the night, she took the lad's cloth and replaced it with another one just like the one he had got from the north wind, but which did not have the magical qualities of the one the north wind had given him. So, when the lad woke up, he took his cloth and continued on his journey, and that day he got home to his mother. "Now," said the lad, "I've been to the north wind's house, and he was very nice to me, because he gave me this cloth, and when I say to it, 'Cloth, spread yourself out, and serve us all kinds of good food,' I can get any type of food that I want." "Oh, I am sure you're telling the truth," said his mother, "but seeing is believing, and I won't believe it until I see it." So the lad got out a table, he laid the cloth on it, and he said, "Cloth, spread yourself out, and serve us all kinds of good food." But the cloth did not produce any food, not even a small piece of bread. "Well," said the lad, "I guess I have no choice but to go back to the north wind." And away he went. So he came to where the north wind lived late in the afternoon. "Good evening," said the lad.
"Good evening," said the north wind.
"I want to be paid for the flour you took from me," said the lad, "because that cloth that you gave me is useless, and not even worth a penny."
"I've got no flour or money for you," said the north wind, "but over there is a ram which produces gold coins as soon as you say, 'Ram, ram, make money.'"
So the lad was happy to have the ram, and so he left the north wind's house again, but because it was too far to get home that day, he stopped to stay the night at the same inn where he had slept before. Now before he ordered any food or drink, he tried what the north wind had said about the ram, and when he spoke the words to the ram, it did produce gold coins for him. But when the landlord saw that, he wanted the ram for himself, and, when the lad had fallen asleep, he replaced the ram with another that looked the same but that could not produce gold coins. The next morning the lad continued his journey, and when he got home to his mother he said, "The north wind really is a nice friend, because now he has given me a ram which can produce gold coins, if I only say, 'Ram, ram, make money.'" "I am sure that you are telling me the truth," said his mother, "but I can't believe that this is real unless I am able to see the ram produce the gold coins." "Ram, ram, make money," said the lad. But the ram did nothing, and did not make any gold coins. So the lad went back again to the north wind, and yelled at him furiously, and said that the ram was worthless, and that the north wind must pay for the flour he had blown away.
"Well," said the north wind, "I have nothing else to give you but that old stick in the corner over there. But it's a special stick, that if you say, 'Stick, stick, lay on it,' it will hit things until you say, 'Stick, stick, stop now.'" So, because the journey home was long, the lad stopped again at the same inn as before. But because he guessed that the stick might be affected like the cloth and the ram were the last times, he just laid down on a bench and began to snore, and he acted like he was asleep. Now the landlord, who thought that this stick must be worth something like the cloth and the ram, he found another stick which looked just like it. And when he heard the lad snoring, he was going to switch out the two. But just as the landlord was about to take it, the lad cried out, "Stick, stick, lay on!" So the stick began to hit the landlord, and he jumped over chairs and tables and benches, and yelled and roared, oh my, tell the stick to stop, and I will give you back both your cloth and your ram." When the lad thought that the landlord had had enough, he said, "Stick, stick, now stop." Then he took the cloth and put it into his pocket, and he went home with his stick in his hand, and led the ram by a rope tied around its horns, and so at last the lad got his payment for the flour that had been blown away by the north wind. Wow. Now that was an interesting story, wasn't it? There was a lot going on there. Let's talk about it. Let's start with our characters, all right? Let's talk about our story elements. Our characters, our setting, our plot. Our characters in the book, we had two very main characters, didn't we? The title is called The Lad Who Went to the North Wind. So can you think of two characters right there in the title? Yep. The lad, the boy in the story, is one of our main characters. And the North Wind is one of our main characters. And they interacted a lot during this story. We also had the lad's mother and the landlady and the landlord at the inn. So we had a lot of people in this story. What about the setting? Where did this story take place? Well, I'm not really sure. It doesn't say exactly in the book where this takes place, but we do know that there were some different setting locations that the story happened in, like the house of the lad and also the house of the North Wind. And then, of course, the inn, right? Where all those things were stolen from him. So that's our setting. We have our characters. What about the plot? Remember, the plot is what happens in a story, okay? So let's think about what happened in this story, right? The lad went into the cellar to get what? To get flour. Yep, they were going to make some bread or something. And the north wind was around, and he was blowing, and he blew the flour away. And the boy said, "Hey, that's not very nice. I want that back." So he went to find him. And what does the north wind do? Is he mean to the boy, to the lad? No, he's not mean to him. No, he gives him gifts, right, to try to make up for the flour that he had blown away. So that's nice. That's nice of him to try to make amends, to try to make things right when he had caused a mistake. What did he give him? Do you remember? There were 3 items that he gave to the lad.
And it's okay if you don't remember what order they were in. Let's go over. Let's talk about which ones they were. He got the magic cloth, right? He got the ram, and he got the stick. And all of these items had magical qualities, didn't they? And that's kind of what makes this story so fun, isn't it? So what did the cloth do? Do you remember? The cloth, he told it to make what? He said, give us all kinds of good food. Yep. And this cloth would produce all kinds of food. That sounds good. I would like that cloth. And then the ram. And what's a ram? Do you know? A ram is like a male sheep with horns. Curly horns, right? And this ram, do you remember what it was supposed to do? It made gold coins. And so when he told the ram to make money, this ram would produce gold coins. And that sure would be helpful, wouldn't it? You would never run out of money that way. And then what was the last thing? It was a lot different, but it certainly helped in this story, didn't it, right? The stick. The magic stick. And what does this stick do when you tell it to? Well, it's not really very kind, right? But this stick will go and it'll hit things. Whack, 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 whack. Until you tell it to stop. And that helped the lad in this story because when the landlord tried to come by and steal his things for the third time, the boy was able to say, stick, get him. And that stick got the landlord until he finally said, okay, I'm sorry. I'll give it all back to you. I'll give you all your things that I stole. So it worked out for him, didn't it? I really enjoy getting to read about the plot of this story, the what happens, because there's a lot going on and it's kind of fun. And we see some patterns there, right? He goes, he gets payment for the flour from the wind. He has to stay the night in the inn. It gets stolen. He goes home and then finds out that he was robbed, that they switched out his magical items with regular items. So he has to go back and forth and back and forth. So it's kind of fun because we get used to that pattern. And then at the end, we get to see how it's all, tied up and how everything gets to be okay. Is this a story or a poem? It's a story. Yep. Because we don't have things like verses or rhyming in this story. This type of text would be a story text versus what? An informational text. Remember, an informational text is something that you would read to gain knowledge about a subject. And so this text was really just a fun story to read. So that would be a story. Let's talk about how the story about the introduction and about the conclusion. Okay, remember, a story is made up of different parts, right? The introduction is how the story starts, and then you have the main body of the story, and then you have the conclusion, which is how the story ends. So let's talk about our introduction. Our introduction, the boy, right, the lad, goes down into the cellar to get some flour for cooking. And who blows the flour away? Do you remember? The north wind. That's exactly right. The north wind blows away the flour, and that's how everything gets started, right? Because the lad says, you know what? I'm going to his house. I'm going to go see him, and I'm going to get it back. And that's how the whole story begins. And so he goes back and back and forth, and his things are getting stolen, and he thinks that he's got something valuable, and it turns out he's been tricked. And this happens all the way until the end of the story with our conclusion, which after the magical stick helps him to get his things back, the lad goes back home, and now he's able to go home to his mom, and he has the magical cloth and the magical ram and the magical stick. And so they're able to live happily and to have food to eat, and they're not going to starve anymore. And so that's our conclusion, and that's a happy conclusion, isn't it? Let's talk about how our story is told, our point of view. Okay, you remember what point of view is? It's in what way is this story? Are we experiencing this story? Are we experiencing this story through the eyes and the voice of a character? That would be first person, right? Well, this story would be a third person point of view because we have like a narrator who's telling us the story, right? We are reading this, and it's like we can see what's going on. We can hear the lad talking to the wind. We can see him going into the inn and getting his things taken. So all of this is happening from a third person point of view. This might be one of my favorite stories we've read so far. I really like the idea of how the lad is able to finally get what's right. Okay, he has some trouble, but does he ever give up? No, he doesn't ever give up. He goes back and forth and back and forth. And you know what he does too? He gets angry at the north wind because he decides that the north wind has tricked him, but then he realizes, nope, this north wind is actually just giving me things, and it's actually the people at the inn who are taking my stuff. So it's there's a good lesson in there about, don't always, sometimes assumptions, right? Assuming, thinking that things are what they are can be dangerous if it's not true. And so if he had blamed the north wind, and if he had, been mean to him, maybe that north wind wouldn't have helped him. But he was able to find out exactly who it was that was treating him poorly, and that was the landlord and the landlady. And because of that, he didn't ruin any relationships, and it ended up being okay for him, right? Because he advocated for himself, he made sure that he got what was rightfully his, and he didn't ever give up, did he? So glad you all joined me in this one. I'm looking forward to our next reading. As always, there's a lot to learn, so let's get started.